What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Plastic Power Podcast. This is Starblast Studios alongside with Daredevil 19. And once again on this episode, we have brought back the man, the myth, the legend, Jordan the Dragonlee.
What's up, guys? Happy to be back.
Happy to have you here, man. Yeah, very excited. Today on this episode, we're going to be talking about Jordan's fan manga, Dragon Ball Infinity. This is a very popular Dragon Ball fan manga. It has been around for quite a few years. A lot of people have talked about it. A lot of people have really enjoyed the story. And I just figured it would be a great time, as ever, to, kind of go into it and see, just to go in a little bit more as to, what he was thinking about throughout the story. So starting off with a brief introduction, if before anyone actually starts, if you don't know what Dragon Ball Infinity is, there will be a link in the description, whether it's on YouTube or Spotify that you're listening here from, that is gonna link you to the episode that's from Rising Fist. It has the full 40 minute animation on there, which is really, really good. I even voiced in there as the main character of Taima. It was really one of my most important things as a voicing on anything, really. So really hope you guys check that out. There's also some other videos as well, from Mondo, going over it. And there will be other links as well to support Jordan's, maybe his Patreon, everything like that in the description. So, but yeah. Jordan, so when it came to the mindset and the story that you wanted to originally tell, what was it? Tell me a little bit more about that. Going into Dragon Ball Infinity.
Well, it's kind okay. So after I watched Battle of Gods, prior to that, Dragon Ball had been over for a while.
Yep.
So, Battle of Gods was a big deal, and I had a lot of things play out in my life before Dragon Ball Super came back, and I had grown a lot as a person since I consumed Dragon Ball when I was younger. I had done a lot of studying. I had done a lot of learning. And I never really took the time to go back and consume Dragon Ball again as an adult who was more intelligent and who understood what was going on better. I had never took the time to do that. So when Battle of Gods came out, it was almost like it created that opportunity for me to just go back and look at it with my new mindset. And I was a huge fan of Egyptian mythology and Journey to the West and Chinese mysticism and stuff like that. So Battle of Gods particularly was very inspiring for me because, it had been a long time since I'd seen Dragon Ball. And after all these years, when I finally did see it, it just so happened that they were doing something with the story that was very reminiscent of my personal preferences. So when I got to see Goku and Beerus fight, and I got to see a character who was based on basically one of my favorite characters in mythology face another character who was a representation of Egyptian mythology, that was very inspiring because, I was getting to see two of my favorite mythologies face each other in Battle of Gods. So that was a big part of the inspiration for Taima as a character because I had actually learned during this time that there was a lot in common between Egyptian mythology and Journey to the West and Chinese mythology. So essentially my story is just a play on all of the things in Egyptian mythology that are extremely ridiculously similar to things in Journey to the West and Chinese mythology. Just like Goku was based on Sun Wukong, the main character of my story is based on an Egyptian god known as Babi, he is the Egyptian monkey god, and him and Sun Wukong have so much in common that it almost felt like a wasted opportunity for me to not take advantage of it.
Yeah.
So I started workshopping this story, and it came out really well. A lot of the stuff in the story, a lot of the stuff that I tried to do in the story, I tried to be as Toriyama-esque as possible. And I've talked about this with Heesh before, but Toriyama likes to do role reversal in Dragon Ball. He'll take a lot of stuff from Journey to the West and he'll kind of reverse the roles. For example, Goku's pure of heart at the start of Dragon Ball and Bulma has impure intentions, and in Journey to the West, it's the exact opposite. The main character is pure of heart, and Sun Wukong doesn't have pure intentions. So he switched that around there, and since I've caught on to the fact that that was kind of his storytelling style, I decided to do the same thing with Dragon Ball Infinity. So, for example, a great example of this is Taima is a slave at the start of the story.
Yeah.
And that was to parallel the fact that Sun Wukong and Goku both were completely free at the start of their story. Like, on a ridiculous level. Like, they can do whatever they want. They don't have to worry about anything. They're in a place where there's plenty of food, plenty of water. They basically live in paradise, and they're completely free.
So
Whereas Taima, he lives in the middle of the desert where there's nothing.
Yeah.
And you know, he's being forced to work every day. And I wanted that to be a parallel to their lives, you know.
And it's just like, I love that because it's just like that whole parallel that just so happened to be there also like greatly ties to the connection of it towards, you know, Egyptian mythology and where, you know, like things originated from, like even going, you know, with the pyramids and stuff like that. It's like that it's multiple things being referenced, one thing being a role reversal, one thing, you know, being like legitimately, you know, you could say was the what, you know, was how the Hebrews were treated, you know, back, you know, in Egyptian mythology. And it's just like there's so many parallels to it. It's just like, I think it's just so interesting to see it just, and it comes off like, you know, so refreshing just how much history and is being referenced, not, you know, from not from like our world and such, but like, you know, in Dragon Ball in multiple different ways. It's like, it's a really good, refreshing thing, which is why I think a lot of people really enjoy the story.
Well, yeah, Toriyama, he mastered the art of referencing 1,000 things at once. So essentially what he'll do is he'll like tie so many things together that trying to comprehend everything that he's making reference to at once is actually difficult. And you know, he's a huge nerd. He's a fan of like American films and you know, of course the films from his era as a child, manga and stuff like that. And he is so creative in terms of his imagination that he can just put things in the art itself. Not even necessarily just dialogue, but he can just put things in the art itself that references different things from different forms of media, and he'll use it all at once. So you can look at a picture can say so much, and Toriyama, he really takes advantage of that in his stories.
No.
He's really mastered the art of not just referencing things through the story itself, but through the designs, through the art, through the settings, stuff like that. So, you know, he's just got ridiculously good technique when it comes to making a story feel extremely rich, despite the fact that he's a discovery writer. He has such a huge imagination and such a huge bank of things that he's a fan of in terms of being a nerd that he just has a huge well to pull from in terms of like being creative in his story. And that's kind of the case with me. I'm just a huge nerd, so I know a lot about a lot of different things, and so that kind of gives me the opportunity whenever we're sitting and we're working out the story to, like, you know, really be creative and use my imagination.
Yeah, you do got a creative mind just from that story. But I do know that you love, like, history. Like, it does show a lot in the story. But, yeah, like, the way you really go in depth with, like, how you study stuff, and readers appreciate stuff like that. Like, you do have a lot of knowledge about a lot of things, and that's perfect for someone writing a story too. Like how you're describing Toriyama, pretty much you're very similar in a way, and you can see how much Toriyama does inspire you as a manga creator. And your story was very unique and entertaining, and the story does intrigue you and pique your interest, and you're curious as to what's going to happen. One thing, though, when we first see Taima, how old is he?
He is 12 years old.
Okay.
And by the time so essentially I picked the age that Saiyans first start to have their growth spurt.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to pick the age where he's just at the verge of shooting up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
by the time he's in the arena and he's being influenced by Brood, that causes him to shoot up.
Yeah.
Because he's in a situation where he's having to survive, and that makes things more difficult for him. So essentially the idea is that being subjected to tough circumstances ends up making him bigger and stronger at a very young age.
Yeah.
He's only in the arena for like 3 or 4 years.
Yep.
But like by the time he's out, like he's, you know,
he's
huge.
Yeah, he's fully grown. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does change a lot from the beginning of the arena to the end of it.
Yeah, and one thing people, like I said, I try to tell the story subtly through art, a lot like Toriyama. Like a lot of the dialogue itself, a lot of people don't understand this about Dragon Ball, but the dialogue itself only tells part of the story. A lot of the story is in the art and in implications and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, for example, the fact that Brood has a friend from the Thoth, the race of the Thoth, is there to suggest that he has grown as a person a little due to the fact that he has been subjected to somebody from an entirely different civilization who can teach him new things.
Yeah.
So the idea is that, you know, he couldn't go visit the city, so the city came to him. So through Reiki, he shows up, and you know he kind of helps Brood become a better person.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like so. Hold on, Reiki is the is he
The
like
one
the other bird
in there with him.
Yeah, the other, like, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just like I really liked what I enjoy about it is, you know, towards the end is like you have two different characters and such kind of having like, so like by the time that they, like, you know, Brood and Taima are actually fighting, you already have a decent understanding of each other's motives. Like, you know, Brood obviously, you know, being, you know, the father of Beerus and Champa, you know,
Yep.
in this instance, you know, having like, but he also has the thing. It's like, it's really interesting because you wrote it in a way that makes it to where he has a perception of who he believes his children are, but it's ultimately incorrect because it's not based off of him seeing it. It's off of, like, you know, what his wife, you know, has been telling him. He doesn't actually, like, you know, fully, you know, get that. Oh, like, and it's actually, like, I think, you know, done in a way where it seems deep. Like, it seems like, you know, it's more humanized and such, but it's really not. And I've talked to you about this before, how in the instance, you know, Beerus is, you know, Champa is eating the pain away of not having a dad, and, you know, Beerus is just, you know, sleeping all day because of a depression thing. And it's like, I thought that was an interesting thing where it's just like he views that as a depression, but it's more so just the fact that they're just doing things based off of, like, you know, the habits that they were born from.
It's actually not him. It's his wife. His wife is the one that's telling him all these things. So the whole point of that is she's looking at that from a feminine perspective. She doesn't understand that Beerus and Champa aren't the kids that she thinks that they are. The truth is that Beerus just wants to live like the Pharaoh. He doesn't care that his dad's in prison. He just wants to live the high life. And Champa's the same way. Like, he's actually more upset. Beerus is actually way more upset about the fact that he is living such a lowly life than he is his dad being in prison. He actually doesn't really care about that. His mom just sees him upset, and she just assumes that it's this really tragic thing that's going on. And I'll be honest with you, you know, part of the reason I decided to do that is not only to, like, create that illusion, but creating that illusion is really appealing to people who like deep, humanizing stories when it comes to Dragon Ball. So it allowed me to take advantage of that while also simultaneously creating this funny scenario where that's not actually the case. So you have to be, like, really intelligent to catch on to that. But that's the point, is, like, you look at it, and if you're the type of person who likes drama and you like that type of storytelling, you're going to just assume that that's the case because that's the kind of storytelling you like. But if you're intuitive and you can catch on to the more goofy aspects of the story, you can pick up on the fact that, that's not actually the case. As a matter of fact, I ended up dropping some bonus pages later where Champa is, he's just eating all of Beerus' scraps, and Beerus actually makes it more clear in these bonus pages that he's actually just dreaming of being the Pharaoh. He actually just wants to be in charge. He wants to have access to all the best food.
That's the vibe I got from that part when they showed Champa and Beerus. I just thought they were just being themselves.
Right.
And another thing, like I was reading some of the comments, some people didn't even realize, like you're hinting like, yeah, that's Beerus and Champa, and some people didn't understand it. So you had other people saying, if you didn't know, that's Beerus and Champa. But I do like how you threw them in there. You didn't have to, but you threw in that little like, hey guys, check this out.
Right.
So I did like that too.
If you don't realize that is Beerus and Champa, go back and rewatch Dragon Ball Super until you understand who these characters are.
Yeah. Beerus is he might be, he's not my favorite modern Dragon Ball Super character, but he is probably
one of the better.
One of my favorite. Like,
yeah, he's funny.
He and Whis together, I'd say, in terms of like the pairs of characters that have been introduced to Super, he and Whis are my favorite new additions.
Yeah, they are great on the screen, and they do add like that comic relief now that we see how they are and we know their personality
well,
is.
Well, they're a great representation of the duality of the series, Whis has very feminine traits, Beerus has very masculine traits.
This is what I mean, man. Your mind, you really... Yeah. You really like analyze stuff, and that's something that's really like pretty damn cool about how your mind works. So I like how you do that. Like I don't always think of stuff like that, so it's always just real interesting hearing you.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that me and Toriyama are fans of a lot of the same things. Like I said, whenever I was younger and I used to watch Dragon Ball, I didn't understand all these things, but I grew up. Like I had kids, I have a family now, and so like, and I actively work on myself. I actively try to be more intelligent. I actively take part in researching things that I'm interested in, and so
it's good for your mind, for anybody.
Coming back to Dragon Ball. Was very different for me than most people, I would say, in terms of like the new era of Dragon Ball fans, because I just had a completely different perception of the series. That's why I'm such a Super fan, is because like honestly, like if I didn't like work on myself as I was growing up and like do some research and like study history and mythology and stuff like that, I might not have enjoyed Dragon Ball Super as much as I did when it came back. Yeah. But because I did do that, it made me a fanatic. Like I love it,
Yeah. So I love Super too. I thought it would be different than what I was thinking, which I know a lot of people are probably thinking that too. But they said the story needed to be told, and I'm like, geez, if they really want them to tell it, like I wanna see it or read it. But I love Super. I'm so happy it came back.
Yeah, I actually agree the story needs to be told, because like Ultra Instinct and stuff like that, a lot of that stuff really does feel like a more proper ending to Goku's like journey and stuff like that, like playing on like the martial arts aspects that he was founded on and stuff like that. So like it does kind of feel like a lot of the stuff that they done with Super was meant to actually go into the story at some point, which is something I really like about it.
Yeah.
I only recently caught this other reference point in the actual story, because I guess it was just because I didn't know too much about it. But throughout a lot of for a good majority of time, it was a mystery to us as to what exactly the purpose of the pyramids were, and it was only like I forgot, like I think like 50 years ago that someone basically had this theory in that the pyramids were a gigantic tool that were a means of actually legitimately, conducting power and supplying power throughout parts of Egypt. And it's just, I didn't know any about that. I only recently found out about that, in like a recent video that I popped in, like, with YouTube, where someone was explaining it. And now it's just like, I remembered exactly, that's exactly what, the pyramids are for in, you know, your story as well. Like, you legitimately are like have the pyramids be a means of gaining power and like and supplying energy throughout the city, and it's just
Yeah.
like I like that
So
little bit right there.
yeah. So in the city that Beerus's race resides in, they use batteries. They use solar powered batteries that are created inside the pyramids, and that is based on a
Yep.
Russian theory about how they used to implement the pyramids. It's actually
Yeah.
an old theory in comparison to like the modern Egyptian power theory, but like
Yep.
there's a reason I did that, because this Russian theory, despite the fact that it works in theory, it's primitive in comparison to like the modern idea of how the pyramids work, because they've
Yeah.
done more research and they found out more.
We interrupt this podcast, which is brought to you by Taco Bell. As you can see, Starblast just enjoyed a nice sip from Taco Bell. And before that, he enjoyed a tasty meal, which is why this podcast is brought to you by Taco Bell. Think outside the bun.
So
Yeah.
it's the city of Su, where the Thoth reside, when Timer
Yep.
shows up, he tries to like explain how the city works and how the energy is like spread throughout the atmosphere and stuff like that. Like, he tries to explain that, and of course he's supremely intelligent in comparison to Taima because of the nature of his race. So he's
Yeah.
trying to like, so that scene, it's not necessarily me flexing on my knowledge of it, although there is a little bit of that.
Yeah.
It's more so just to portray the idea that that race is so ridiculously advanced that they've figured out how to basically have self-sustaining energy. And so
Yeah.
him going off on this rant about how it works is to signify how intelligent they actually are, and how they've created a
Yeah.
utopian society. But so he explains in his dialogue with Taima that there's a lot to it. There's like minerals that they take advantage of that create electricity whenever water runs through these tunnels that are underneath the pyramids, and that
Yep.
creates static electricity, which leads to producing energy. That's all based on stuff that I have actually studied for the modern theory in terms of how they've used the pyramids to power the city. Because when they first discovered that this may be a possibility, they discovered it because there's no torch residue in the pyramids, which is extremely weird because it's always dark in there. So essentially, like, the idea is that because there's no torch residue and it's pitch black in there, at some point they had to have some kind of light source
Light,
in there.
yeah.
Yeah,
You can't go in there
didn't-
blind.
Right. So that's where the theory stems from, and they've also found giant electric coils in the pyramids.
Yeah.
So like, essentially, just like the idea of a civilization having that sort of technology before us has always been extremely intriguing to me.
Yeah.
Thoth in particular.
is.
Thoth in particular is said in legend to be he resided in Atlantis. Atlantis is a lost branch city of Egypt, and
Yeah.
so essentially all this is just a play on the legend of Thoth, a lot of stuff in Egyptian mythology, and I wanted to connect it all together because the modern theory of how how the pyramids works very well with the idea and legend of what Thoth did in his lifetime and how Egyptian society thrived and existed. So I really wanted to like visualize that and sort of push that vision onto people so they can imagine it and have fun with the idea of that, because I think it's very fascinating.
Yeah, it is. That's such a cool way how you're saying how you wanted to pretty much like connect everything into all these different things you were just saying. So I like how you did that. That was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I think
One thing I would really like to talk about, just because a lot of people don't notice it, is the first of all, if you're a Marvel fan, if you read chapter 4 of Dragon Ball Infinity, when Taima and Brood fight in the arena, a lot of the action sequences and stuff like that I referenced from Thor versus Hulk in the
I was so close.
Yeah, if you'll go back and look, like, I don't know if you remember like how the fight plays out in that film, but it's very Dragon Ball-esque. Like, the fight between Hulk and Thor in that film is very Dragon Ball-like, because like Thor like transforms at the end. That fight. You know what I mean? So,
yep.
Because it was so Dragon Ball-like, I was like, you know what? Because this is obviously Dragon Ball inspired, let's take something that's Dragon Ball inspired and use it in a Dragon Ball story. You know what I mean?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. But essentially the idea is something that I really like to call attention to when it comes to that chapter, because a lot of people don't notice this. Yeah. So Brood is missing his eye, right?
Yeah.
And then Taima gets the scar over his eye. And essentially that is the Pharaoh's way of marking you. And what marking you means is he essentially makes you obsessed with him. Okay. Yeah. So
like how Brood wanted to get revenge and take him down.
Right. So what he'll do is he essentially his goal, and he's not even super consciously aware of this. This is just a manipulation tactic that he understands on an instinctual level. He sort of just does it on instinct. Like, he really doesn't think about it like too much. But the whole entire purpose of it is to create a second self. So what he's doing there is he's actually creating a second personality amongst these characters. So like in Journey to the West, there's the idea of the real self and the second self. So the idea is that by making these characters obsessed with the Pharaoh and hell-bent on revenge, it creates a second false identity that causes them to make mistakes and be hot-headed. So he likes to take people who are pure and in the classic sense, and corrupt them through creating a second personality in them that's obsessed with revenge. And that is a huge part of Taima's character development, because you'll notice at the very beginning of the story he's very, very pure as an individual. And after he goes into the arena, he gets toughened up a little bit. He's still pretty pure, but he gets toughened a little bit. And then by the time he has the scar on his eye, he's completely jaded. Yeah. So and now
he wants to get Noob.
Right. So the idea is that he is being manipulated, and like, I can't give away where this is all going.
You don't want to.
honestly, but
make people.
The whole idea is that ability to create a second self in Taima has huge implications in the story, because he's not pure. If you know how Dragon Ball works, I've explained a lot on my channel exactly how Dragon Ball as a series works. You'll know that Taima falling victim to his own ego is a huge deal in Dragon Ball.
I remember you told me. Now I'm now realizing where that whole thing was going. I'm not gonna say it, but I know what happens. Like
how
the whole thing of him having that other side of himself, with Noob having his other side of himself, that's different sets of character clashing.
That is actually a play on the effect that the Jade Emperor had on Sun Wukong. When Sun Wukong he has a dream about going back to heaven and conquering heaven, and he tells the Jade Emperor in his dream, he's like, you treated me like a demon, like you treated me like a monster, and so I'm gonna be the monster that you treated me like. So essentially the idea is that, like, through the way he's being treated, he's forming a second self. And so and also the Pharaoh, a lot of people don't realize this, but like the Pharaoh, he's also a play on the Monkey King. All of these characters, like something else that I do that Toriyama also does is I like to use personality traits like within the plot in terms of how Journey to the West chose to implement these personality traits, because the Monkey King and Tripitaka are essentially the Asian equivalent of the angel and the devil on your shoulder.
Okay.
So like if you ever like start to try and read Journey to the West, this is something really important to understand, because in Buddhism, it is like what makes us evil is our selfish need to survive. You don't necessarily have to be an evil person, but the necessity to survive will cause you to do selfish things. And it's a Buddhist idea that the only way you can be pure as an individual is to essentially discard that part of yourself. So Sun Wukong represents the most extreme form of an individual who is just out for his own survival, and the main character of Tripitaka is based on someone who has completely lost that aspect of himself, which is why Sun Wukong has to be implemented to protect him on the Journey to the West, because he doesn't have the ego to protect himself. He's completely abandoned it. So the whole idea is them working together and learning how, each idea has its merit, and essentially achieving the balance between each idea. And I like to play on that with my own characters. Like, so Brood, for example. Brood is being influenced by Reiki, and Reiki comes from he comes from a society of pacifists who are extremely intelligent. Brood comes from a society of warriors who are constantly in battle. So it's very, very similar to the relationship that Tripitaka and the Monkey King have. It's like the relationship that they have is very, very similar. And, Toriyama has sort of mastered the art of using this symbiotic relationship and spreading it amongst multiple characters in the story. Sort of like how Beerus and Whis, you can kind of see that dynamic between them. You can see that dynamic between Goku and Vegeta. You can see that dynamic between Gohan and Piccolo. So that dynamic exists everywhere throughout Dragon Ball. So I do the same thing. I play on that.
So
I like that you do that.
I want to rewind
go
just
ahead,
back a
Starblast.
little bit, like on the whole thing, about the pyramids, because the only reason why, and you made it in the story very clear that the pyramids were necessary, was because and why they were important to the plot was the power in order to kind of help out during the 7 days of darkness. The 7 days of darkness in particular is what I'm interested in here. And for my question, like, where's the inspiration behind the 7 days of darkness, and how does it function on this planet? Like, why is it just dark around the entire planet like that whole time, or how is that whole thing, working in that one given area?
Well, the idea is that it plays on the cycle of life and death. There's a lot to it. I mean, the world was created. I had a lot of inspiration from 7 Days of Darkness. I mean, like the world, the entire universe was created in 7 days. There's 7 Dragon Balls. But the idea is that the 7 Days of Darkness has to exist, because if it doesn't exist, then the jackals and all of the beings that can only exist within the night in that environment could take over the entire planet. So it exists for the purpose of essentially keeping those two halves of the planet separated from each other.
And to also give a reason for Taima to become a great ape.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's true, yeah. It also makes that whole scene much more epic, because the 7 Days of Darkness is like this legendary thing. It's like this thing that only to them is like myth and legend. So it makes it that much more over the top that Taima experiences his great ape form during the 7 Days of Darkness, because it's like this legendary thing. But in terms of like in story, how the 7 Days of Darkness came to be, Garura, he's essentially the kami of that planet.
Okay.
And he is what's known as a Taioshin. Now, a Taiyoshin is essentially a group of gods that I workshopped into the Dragon Ball universe, and they are what's known as sun gods. A Taiyoshin is a sun god. So, like the Kai create planets and civilizations and stuff like that, the Taiyoshin are in charge of creating stars. That's their job. Okay. So the stars that they create, they can see through them. All the light that comes from the stars, anything the light touches, they can see it.
That's
So
pretty
that's what
damn
makes
dope.
the Taiyoshin pretty epic, because the suns are the result of their life energy.
Yeah.
So when the light hits the planet, they observe the planet through the light. They can see, so they're sort of like omnipresent in that way.
Yeah, yeah.
So
See, that's just something
idea
you
is-
added yourself. That's just such a very, like, a cool idea, like a really unique idea. Like, who would think of doing that? You know, it's like a smart way to put something into a story. So
yeah.
yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
There's also
so the
other tie-ins
idea-
too to Egyptian mythology, to like what the stars were, and like, you know, and connections to it, like that.
Well, yeah, the
Egyptians had
all-seeing
to
eye
exist.
of Ra. Yeah, that's right. The all-seeing eye of Ra. That's what the all-seeing eye of Ra is. It's the sun, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, what happened was, Noob, he relies on the moon, partially for his power, but he also relies on the souls of the dead.
Yep.
And if the jackals run around and they're killing people, and it's night pretty often, then Noob can eventually come back to life.
Yeah.
So that's essentially the idea, is that, you know, it prevents that from playing out. It's sort of a way of slowing down the possibility that that he'll come back from the afterlife. That's part
Yeah,
of
and
it.
he'll have his full power and everything.
Yeah. But also, the whole entire planet is just an experiment on Garura's part. He's a lot like Kami in the sense that he's sort of indifferent, and he
Yeah.
just wants to see how the mortals develop.
Yep.
So the idea is I'll just go ahead and I'll tell you the backstory behind Garura. I am going to explain this in the manga eventually, but I'll
Yeah.
just go ahead and sort of give you some context. But I got the inspiration for Garura from Garuda in Chinese, Tibetan, and Hindu mythology. He's this sun god who he's a bird, much like Ra, but he ends up
Okay.
he was a demon,
Yeah.
but he ends up becoming the pet of Buddha himself for a while, and essentially becomes his enforcer. But
Yeah.
one day, a bat demon, and this is in Journey to the West, one day a bat demon farted in the presence of
I did not
in the
expect
presence
that.
of Buddha.
Uh-oh. That's
It came out of nowhere.
disrespectful.
I'm sorry.
It did.
It's fine. I totally expected that reaction. It's fine. So he let one rip in the presence of Buddha, and that made Garuda so upset that he attacked this bat demon. And when he did that, Buddha was like, "Dude, you chill out. I'm gonna banish you for a while. You need to like learn your lesson." So like, the idea is it's something similar to that.
Yeah.
Garura is a ex-Taiyoshin who was essentially fired by the Grand Supreme Kai because he's too aggressive. And so,
Yeah.
due to the fact that he is sort of a rogue Taiyoshin, he decided to try and be the kami of a planet. And that is the planet that Taima is on. So essentially the whole planet is just him attempting to play the role of God to see if he's, you know, really, you know, in the wrong in terms of his treatment of mortals. And it's really to kind of rectify the disagreement that he and the Grand Supreme Kai had.
Yeah.
He essentially wants to prove that he's capable of being a good Taiyoshin. That's essentially what he wants to do.
That's where I thought you were leading up to. That does make sense. But
Yeah. But he's
I
a
was gonna ask you
hybrid
something
of Ra in that way, because Ra did the same thing. Like, he created all life on Earth.
Yeah.
He's a hybrid of Ra and Garuda, which is the reason I call him Garura, because he's a hybrid of two different characters from two mythologies. So
Yeah.
That is
yeah,
rather
that-
interesting.
that's something. Yeah. Go ahead, Starblast.
And then the other thing too, you made it to where he had like there was like a flip to him, and you showed this specifically in the visualization aspect in the manga form itself, where he turned into Moro as well. Tell me a little bit more about that.
okay, so when Ra created all life on Earth, he essentially fell victim to his ego for a little while. And when he did, he took on the form of a goat instead of a bird. And he also had a different name, and it was Kum was his name. And essentially, that god was capable of taking his own life energy in Egyptian mythology and using it to bring creatures to life. So he would create clay figures of different animals, different creatures, and stuff like that, and then he would use his own life essence to breathe life into these clay objects. And he also has the head of a goat. So I wanted to take advantage of that and essentially make, Garura's goat form his ego. So it's very, very similar to the relationship that Piccolo and Kami have to each other. It's very, very similar in that sense. It's just like it's that part of his personality coming out.
Yeah. That's pretty interesting. Like, he split himself apart, kind of like what Kami did.
Yeah, essentially the idea is that in order for him to be a good ruler, in order for him to be the type of ruler that the Grand Kaioshin wanted him to be, he had to separate himself exactly like Kami did whenever he separated himself from Piccolo. Except in this case, instead of him trying to impress the Kami of Earth, he's trying to, he's took a dead, barren planet who didn't have a Kami at all, and he's using it and building it from the ground up to try and impress the Grand Kaioshin.
Yep.
I've noticed this one thing as well. I think you specifically told me, but in the book of Thoth, if I'm not mistaken, there was because we saw Taima kind of like amplifying it. There's a lot of things in there that reference to Journey to the West, like for example the the cape being like the seal, and like how they seal demons, like in that one live action movie where they get turned into like dolls, but in this case he just gets sealed into the cape and everything, and in this instance though, what I'm referring to is that Taima learned the crane school martial arts technique, and then also the turtle school technique. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is off podcast a while ago, you said that this is where later down the line throughout history these scrolls somehow also made it to Earth, in which certain masters like Mutaito and other martial arts people, they took these scrolls and learned martial arts using that and everything like that, and then passed that information down from generations.
Yeah, that's right. So essentially the idea is, in Egyptian mythology, Thoth created writing. Okay, he created writing, so he created the ability to spread information. Okay, he created that. So the idea is that eventually the Thoth will take everything that they've learned in terms of chi control, flying, martial arts, stuff like that, and they'll eventually spread it to every planet in the entire universe. Okay, so eventually they'll leave that planet and they'll end up going and spreading their knowledge throughout the entire universe. As a matter of fact, like TN, like I sort of use that to craft a backstory for TN, because as you know, it's suggested that TN is an alien. So the idea is that the planet he came from was predominantly, culture-wise, the result of the Thoth coming to his planet. So that's the reason that, and the reason I did it that way is because it's very similar to Goku learning to use the primitive fighting style of his people, I just thought it would be really ironic and cool if the Crane's Hermit, he stole this like he in my version of the events, the Crane Hermit went behind Mutaito's back to learn the Crane School. Mutaito's the one that discovered the scrolls, but he went behind his back and read them and learned how to fly and learned everything that he ends up teaching in the Crane School. And then he ends up teaching that to Tien, who is the descendant of these aliens who already used the Crane School. And so he's sort of learning the ancient fighting style of his people without being consciously aware of it. So that was sort of the whole idea there. And I really put a lot of thought and detail into that.
And that explains why, like, in OG Dragon Ball, he was considered, like, like a fighting genius. Like, he was just capable of doing all of these. Like, he had, like, this mass amount of, like, talent and potential as he was depicted, which would make sense because, like, if these fighting techniques were, originated from his people, then no wonder he's going to be, so good at adapting that and using that, in his means of fighting. I like that. That's really clever.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Well, you brought up the Book of Thoth, and I'd really love to talk about that.
Yeah, let's hear about that.
So, Mirai, okay. But by the way, all the characters are named after different time-themed names for the most part. I don't know if you caught on to that. There's a reason for that, but I'll get into that here.
Mirai means future, right?
Yeah, Mirai means future.
Yeah.
Genzai means present. Keiko no Kami, the god that predates both of them, that translates to god of the past, and Taima, it's time. So
yeah.
And there's a reason for that. It's because the future is associated with enlightenment, and the past is associated with your ego. And there's essentially, like, I made a lot of connections to not only how China and Asian mythology view these concepts, but also how Egyptian mythology views these concepts as well. And I wanted to like connect them together. So anyway, the Book of Thoth was supposedly a real thing. Okay, it was supposedly something that actually existed. As a matter of fact, the random number that I drop in the manga about how there's like 36,000 books in this one book, that's actually what's stated about the Book of Thoth in legend. That's not something I made up. That number of books is actually there's two theories. Either the Book of Thoth is one book that contains that much knowledge, or it's that many books, right? So I decided to just use the concept where it's one book with that much knowledge, of course, because it's much simpler and easier.
Sounds better too.
So the other name for Thoth is Tohiti. That's his actual Egyptian name. Thoth is his Greek name. Okay?
Yeah.
His actual name is Tohiti. And Sun Wukong's master in Journey to the West, who is also associated with the crane, by the way, exactly like Thoth, his name is Subhuiti. So they have very similar names. Not only do they have very similar names, they teach very, very, very similar things. Okay? So, for example, in Taoism, you have the concept of yin and yang. But with Thoth, you have the concept of the scales, the balance. So, like, so what they teach is extremely, extremely similar. And in Now, in real life Egyptian lore, it is said that if you read the Book of Thoth, you get a lot of godly abilities, right? And I actually name a few of those in the story. But it's also said that if you read the Book of Thoth, that you are cursed. Okay?
Double-edged sword.
In Journey to the West, when Sun Wukong goes and he meets his immortal master, Subhuiti. By the way, he's also who taught Sun Wukong immortality. And Thoth is the creator of the Fountain of Youth. So they
real quick before you go on, I want to ask one thing about the curse. So you say that his curse that he's cursed. Is this like a similar way, like the similar thing to where the way that Thor was cursed in Avengers: Age of Ultron, where he went into that well and then like he was basically cursed for like the rest of his life, which hence the reason why all the tragedies that took place in Ragnarok and and Infinity War, Endgame, that type of thing.
Well, yeah, I was getting to that, but yeah, you're
Okay.
yeah, you're onto it. It's very similar to how about you to using the Dragon Ball selfishly.
Yeah.
It's very similar to that.
Bulma.
But in Journey to the West, Subhuti tells Sun Wukong after he teaches him Taoist immortality, he tells him, he says, this form of immortality is taboo. It's actually not allowed amongst the gods. We're actually not supposed to practice this form of immortality. And as a result, when the gods find out that you have this form of immortality, you're going to have to face a bunch of disasters. So essentially, in the Journey to the West, Sun Wukong learning Taoist immortality was also accursed. Yeah. So all of these story elements are so ridiculously similar that I essentially just made a hybrid of the two concepts in that scene. So the Book of Thoth, it's a similar thing to Sun Wukong being taught Taoist immortality, and it's also similar to what happens when you actually read the Book of Thoth in Egyptian mythology, and in that if you take the knowledge and you use it incorrectly, you're doomed. That's essentially the idea. So, like, in Journey to the West, whenever Sun Wukong learns Taoist immortality, what's he do with it? He tries to use it to dethrone the Jade Emperor and take over heaven. Okay? He doesn't use it to try and find enlightenment. He doesn't try to use it to be a better person. He uses it to try and take over everything. Okay? That was his intention.
Yep.
Right. And so, Taima having to chase after the Pharaoh is my parallel to Sun Wukong going after the Jade Emperor. But in this sense, you feel as though Taima is the good guy and the Pharaoh is the bad guy, whereas in Journey to the West, it's backwards. Sun Wukong is the villain in that sense, and the Jade Emperor is the victim. So it's sort of my way of just like reversing the roles yet again. You know what I mean? Like that's sort of my storytelling style, and it's something that I adopted from Toriyama. It's just like the way that he plays on these concepts is he does a lot of role reversals and stuff like that, and he uses that to make the story more original, despite the fact that we're adopting concepts from these stories. He uses that to make it different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It makes it more interesting.
Yeah, it does. Instead of just using the same exact thing, you flip it around and you make it different. So, it's definitely a smarter way to write something if you take inspiration from something. So I do like that.
Well, most people, even if they're not consciously aware, and this is something I learned whenever I got into writing, most people, even if they're not consciously aware, are using source material. Even if they're not consciously aware. Because everything that you can imagine, everything that you can think of is in most cases the result of of media that you consumed.
Yeah. 100%.
And you can see that firsthand in Dragon Ball. I mean, how many different movies and like that's something else.
You see it in everything pretty much.
Well, yeah, that's true, but you can really see it in Toriyama's work.
Yeah.
Because, like, it's funny because the stuff that he adds to his stories, he adds it because it's relevant at the time. Which speaks to his abilities as a discovery writer. Sort of like him implementing, like, Terminator-esque concepts in the Cell Saga. He did that because it was relevant. You know what I mean? He did that because Terminator was relevant at the time. and that's also what I do. So, like, if I see a movie and that movie is inspirational, it's likely going to influence the next chapter of Dragon Ball Infinity. You know what I mean? Like, that's just how it goes. Like, whenever you're looking for inspiration and you're writing a story and you're inspired by something, for you not to take advantage of it is a crime. Because,
pretty much, yeah.
Because, like, if you can take advantage of those things, then you can craft not only an interesting story just based on the merit of the story itself, but an interesting story in terms of the creative process as well.
And then it's just like people will associate it with other things, and it instinctively just ties into, the other things that, people would like, they'd find inspirational. That thing would just, end up alongside with the other stuff that naturally just people cater to. It caters to an audience on an instinctual level of what they personally like, and so it's ultimately very good.
That's right.
Yeah. And if you notice it too, you're like, oh, I know where that's from. So it kind of like rings a bell in your head, like I bet they got inspiration from that.
Yeah,
So it's kind of
all
cool.
about-
when you see
That's
stuff
like
that.
exactly what they did in Superhero too. Just like for like a lot of like what they did. They took inspiration from WWE moves, like the Gamma 2
Yeah.
and Piccolo being on the train. Obviously, from Spider-Man. They took some of that as
Yep.
well during in the Granola
Yeah,
arc,
yeah,
with
yeah.
the train and everything. And so
Yep.
it's just like there's a lot of it on all sorts of different ways in different forms of media.
Yeah, when you're a writer, you have to consider psychology. You have to actually consider what gets people excited. You gotta really think about what causes people to have a dopamine hit. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So a lot of that is just seeing stuff that excites them, and it just so happens that seeing references is exciting to human beings.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is.
It's a universal concept. When you see something and you recognize it, you get excited, and then you
Yeah.
want to read more of it because you want to get excited again. So it's a
Oh,
writing
I noticed
technique.
that too.
Yeah.
Like what you were saying, you ever see Man of Tai Chi?
Yeah, I love that
With
movie.
Keanu Reeves?
I love that movie.
Yeah, so do I. But the way you were explaining Noob before, I pictured him as Keanu Reeves. And then as you already know where I'm heading with that. So
Yeah, I already
that
know where you're
kind
headed
of
because it's a very
Yeah,
similar
yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Yep. I'm like, wow, this reminds me like something like that. That reminded me of Man of Tai Chi. And
Yeah.
maybe a little inspiration came from it, or even if it didn't, it's something that I thought of when you were saying that. So yeah, people love when they see stuff that they recognize and something new
That's
that
right.
they're watching or reading.
That's
yeah.
right.
So
Well,
yeah.
I mean, that is the entire. It did influence the story in the sense that it's a trope, right?
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
love that movie. That is one of my favorite movies. I love that movie.
Yeah,
So
it's a good movie.
obviously, it's going to influence my storytelling style. But
Yeah.
a lot of that is just like, what I do as a writer, because I want to be good at what I do, is I just
Yeah.
absorb as much media and as much successful writing and as I can, because I
Yeah.
want to see what makes different works successful. That's what I want to do.
Yep.
I want to learn. That's sort of my goal, is just to learn how to craft a successful story that's impactful and meaningful and sticks with people. Stories are
people want to read it. Yeah.
stories as a whole are so important to mankind
Yeah.
in general. Like, stories are what cause people to have revelations. They're what cause people. They cause people to realize things about themselves and others. And so,
Yeah.
when I was thinking about the type of story that I wanted to tell, I wanted to tell a type of story that would have that same impact that Dragon Ball had on me, in terms of like having revelations and stuff like that, and learning things and having
Yeah.
fun while you're doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Part of the reason I get so excited to read Dragon Ball is because, it's not just the references, it's not just the fact that I'm a fan, it's the fact that, I also learn how Toriyama and Toyotaro and a lot of these writers at Toei and stuff implement these different concepts that they pull from stories into their product, right? So it's all like, it's teaching me, like it's a learning experience for me, and I want other people to be able to experience that through my story. What you learn from a story varies based on who you are and your perception of reality, but it's that any writer, if you're a writer and you're watching this, your goal should be to create something that piques people's interest in the sense that they really feel like they're absorbing something that's meaningful and has an impact.
Yeah.
Even if it's
And
just
then
a
also
fan
something
manga,
that
even
relates.
if it's just a Dragon Ball fan manga. That's what people want
Yeah.
out of stories, you know?
Yeah.
It's like I think
same-
that ultimately it's like I've noticed this too with Dragon Ball. It's depending, you can very much tell when someone is going to actually, you know, win a fight, even if like it's climactic enough. Like you basically would ask like, okay, is this character at the point that they're at in their development actually ready to take down the villain? For example, like
Yeah.
with Goku, when he first entered into the martial arts tournaments, or I guess this wouldn't necessarily be villains. This is like with fight in general. And for example, in the martial arts tournament, Goku at that point when he was young was not ready to actually, you know, fully win. You know, because if he did at that point, he would have grown to be, you know, more, you know, cocky and not understand the important lesson of there being always someone stronger out there and to always, you know, continue
That's
pursuing
right.
self-growth and everything like that. Hence the reason,
Yeah.
you know, that was important for Roshi. You know, the second, you know, tournament, there was other reasons. There was other reasons why he couldn't win. I think it was because he might have still gone down that path at that. But then the third one, it was more so like he was much more mature. He had adult. He grew up, and at that point in time, when there was Piccolo, it's like his character development already like was kind of at a point where this everything instilled, all of these lessons that he learned was already instilled into him. It was just in this case,
Yeah.
it was a matter of need, in that there were stakes set up into which he had to defeat Piccolo, which ultimately winning the tournament wasn't even the ambition. It was just him trying
Yeah.
to, you know, protect everybody and, you know, and do the right thing, like what his pure what he had to do.
Right,
And
and
so-
you actually, speaking of all that, you can actually see how that's the opposite in Dragon Ball Infinity. It's literally the exact opposite. He wins his first ever big arena match. He grows an ego through it. You know, Goku. There was a reason they didn't let him win a tournament until he learned from Kami. Like, there's a reason they didn't let him, you know, win until he was a developed individual, right? Until
Yeah.
he was like, he was capable of being proud of the win and then still continue on his journey to being a martial artist, which is why he gives Piccolo a senzu bean and why he tells him, hey, let's fight again, because at that point he has developed into the type of character that would do such a thing. If he had
Yeah.
won the first tournament, he wouldn't have done that, you know?
Yeah, most likely, yeah.
So all of Goku's, you know, his experiences lead up to that moment, and so, like, you know, everything, it's almost as if in Dragon Ball things just continuously get brighter, right? Things just get more you know, I guess you could say friendly, and it's almost as if Goku makes everything more happy, you know,
Yeah.
as the story
Yeah.
progresses.
Yeah.
And it's
Whereas
like-
Taima, it gets progressively darker. Right?
And-
That's the whole point. It's the opposite. Like, it starts off all bright and shiny and happy, and he's got a very childlike face, and despite the fact that he's in such a horrible situation, he's still handling it with a smile. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, but
That's
as
another
the story
thing,
progresses,
too.
things just get darker and darker and darker, and his expression changes, and who he is changes.
And
He
that
even
I think is
starts
more
off, like-
realistic.
Yeah, he even starts off like in a dark place too. Like he's not free, like what you were saying in the beginning, like how Goku was.
Yeah, like
yeah,
Goku
well, he takes
is
it
a
well. He takes it well. At that point in the story, I would say he still hasn't lost his purity, despite the fact
Yeah.
that he has lived in that situation. He still sort of has his childlike innocence to him, but
Yep.
by the time he gets into the arena, it's gone.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's like, and I like the way that it kind of goes down this path, is because because with Dragon Ball, Toriyama doesn't necessarily use it as a means, you know, to go into a, like, you know, realistic type of thing. He more so is basically explaining the pathway as to how one, you know, would be beneficial for their own personal growth, like how that would reflect to the readers. In your case, you're telling a different story of like, okay, because let's be real. Like a character like Goku is, you know, is unrealistic. It's like a dreamish thing. Yours is more in a sense like,
Like
relatable
Superman.
in the sense because everyone has an ego.
Yeah.
Everyone can see the things that Taima has, with their ego and relate to that and see just how exactly he tackles that and how he goes about, handling that. In a sense, like, you can kind of say like, okay, there's other characters in Dragon Ball that could go through that path, but that's only because of the fact that the presence of Goku is there, to kind of help lead them, to bettering, like to bettering themselves in that way. But in the real world setting, we don't have any people like that who can really, affect you in that manner. So
Well, I learned through Eastern philosophy, and I've talked to you about this before. A lot of the reason that the kings and the leaders of the past were so alluring was because they were so dead set on what they were trying to accomplish. And that's a side effect of your ego. Most of the biggest names throughout history, the greatest conquerors and the greatest leaders of the world, the reason they were so alluring is because they had this like righteous fury to them where they were so dedicated to their idea of morality that people related to that, and so they became alluring and people would rally behind them. So whenever I was crafting Taima, despite the fact that I do believe in like the ideas that Goku stands for, I do believe in that. I wanted to create a character who took advantage of, that historical example that characters like that are alluring. It's, I think that Toriyama subconsciously did that with Vegeta. I don't think he was actually aware that that would be the case when he did it. I don't think he was aware that Vegeta would be so popular. But since I have an understanding of why Vegeta is so popular, I wanted to take advantage of it, right? I understood when I was creating the character. I was like, look, Goku is really popular, but so is Vegeta. Why is each character popular? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's just another example of me really trying to think about what made each character popular, not just, within the media itself, but in terms of their cultural background and in terms of historical significance. So when you see Taima, so dead set on doing the right thing, despite the fact that it slowly evolves into not necessarily being the right thing, it's relatable, right? You see that and you're like, like if I was in that situation, I would do the exact same thing. You can rarely ever say that about Goku. Like, as a matter of fact, like I would even argue that you really can't say that about Goku, to be honest, because he's an enlightened being. It's really hard to relate to who he is as a character, and he is an extremely popular character, but in terms of being relatable, you only really relate to him when you're a kid. When you're a kid, you're like, oh yeah, that you can relate to Goku.
He's a good guy.
Right.
Yeah,
But, like-
Taima I relate to more than Goku.
yeah.
Right.
So right there shows an example of it.
Nah, if it was
Yeah, that's how
if it
you
was
craft
me, I
an
bet
alluring
if it was a
character.
lot of people in Goku's perspective, Frieza would have died on Namek. He wouldn't have gave him energy or anything like that and lit him.
Oh,
Like, nah.
yeah.
Nah, if I the mindset would be like, okay, I have to kill you right now because if I don't, you're gonna end up killing a lot more people. And then the blood will be on my hands. Which, ironically enough, is Goku. It's like he kind of in Super, he's still like somewhat responsible
like
for
that.
all of the people that Frieza had killed up until that point. So it's like
Yeah.
technically the mindset isn't even wrong.
Right. Well, Dragon Ball has a really weird way of like progressing the universe while also regressing it in short bouts. So like, at the end of every story it seems like everything's better than it was before, but then by the next arc everything has just gone to hell. You know what I mean? It's just this never ending
Like
cycle.
Moro to Granola arc.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Could I ask you something real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
So out of all the characters I saw, I liked Brood probably the most besides Taima. Who's one of your favorite characters besides the main character?
That's really hard. Brood is one of my favorite
Yeah.
characters.
When I first saw him,
I really
he's
like
dope.
Brood. I really like Brood and Mirai.
Yep.
I like Mirai because he is sort of, and I haven't talked about this before, but he's sort of like the author in the story. Like, he's sort of like that trope. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if you know this, but like, Toriyama uses a bird avatar to represent himself very often. Okay? Thoth is the god of writing. He is the god of writing. He created writing. So, you know, he sees the future. He's an exposition character. You know what I mean? So there's a lot there in terms of like how I crafted his character in a really unique way to sort of, you know, he's like like back in the Dr. Slump days, Toriyama would put himself in Dr. Slump episodes, but he would do it through avatars. So like he would do it through like a bird character or like Toribot or something like that. And essentially Mirai, he's like that. He's like the author existing within the story in a sense, and that's why I think he's a really, really cool character. But Brood in particularly I really like because, you know, part of me is in that character as well. Actually, part of me is in all of these characters, but like you know,
can't really make a story any other way.
Yeah, I like Brood a lot because whenever I was coming up with Brood, you know, I used to be a big metalhead fan, right?
Yeah.
And a big metal fan, and a lot of the songs, a lot of the songs that I listened to, specifically Pantera, were all about like strength beyond strength. You know what I mean? Like a new level of power. You know what I mean? So whenever I created Brood, I created him with those ideas in mind. You know what I mean?
That is interesting.
Yeah. So like, he's also a hybrid of Beerus and Piccolo, because and you can actually see this whenever Taima and Brood are training. There's actually scenes in there that are references to whenever Piccolo was training Gohan and whenever Beerus was training Vegeta. It's actually like a hybrid of those two situations.
I got that vibe from him too.
Like so essentially not only is he trying to teach Taima how to be a warrior, he's also trying to teach him the principles of survival, and he's also trying to teach him how to fight like him. And Brood is a monster in the sense that he is a destructive force. So I wanted him to, you know, I wanted Taima to be influenced by two characters who, or by a character who is very similar to those two characters, because I wanted like that aspect of his personality to be reflective of not only Piccolo's personality and Vegeta's personality, but Beerus's personality. So it's sort of my way, because Beerus and Vegeta and Piccolo, a lot of the more stern, hard characters they represent the more masculine traits of yin and yang. In most cases, they are like the extreme of the two, the two concepts that exist within Chinese mythology of yin and yang. So like Piccolo, he's the expelled demon that came from Kami. Beerus is a god of destruction who works for an angel. You know, Vegeta, he is the most extreme version of what a Saiyan is. And so like all of those aspects of those characters, I wanted to try and like reference them through Taima whenever he's consumed by his ego. So like whenever that. Taima is a character, I try to reference as many of the characters who are pure of heart in one aspect of his personality, while also referencing most of the characters who are hard asses through the other aspects of his personality. So like Taima is like an amalgamation of like so many different characters in that way, because I want him
which
to
is
be,
good too.
He's
it's all
really
the good
like the product of everything that I've consumed in terms of Dragon Ball content. He's not like he's not inspired from one thing or the other. I actually put a lot of thought into his character.
Even Yugi, like, you know, with the eye that glows on his head, just like
Yugi,
like what he had.
Well, you know,
like,
Yugi, he plays on the same mythology. The character that
Yeah.
Taima is based on is a three-eyed monkey god who he was essentially the devil for a while in Egyptian mythology. When you died, you would have to go through him to get to the afterlife, and he would look into your soul with his third eye.
Yeah.
And if you were evil, he would consume you. He would eat you. But if you weren't, he would allow you to go on into heaven. And in Journey to the West, Sun Wukong plays a very, very similar role. He is also sort of like the devil of that story. And he's also capable of... He has the ability through his golden fiery eyes to see into the character of people and decipher whether or not they are good people. So those two characters are very, very similar in that way. So I wanted to play on that.
It's like what Ghost Rider does too, with that one thing. Like if you're evil, he kills you pretty much. But
Right.
I like how you
it's a
did that
very
though with
common
your main
trope,
character. Yeah. But I like how you didn't just make your main character just one type of personality. You put a lot of different, you put a lot of thought into it, and you mixed in a lot of different aspects into the one character, which is pretty cool. Well, a bunch of different characters,
and that's how all my characters
personality
are, really.
traits.
Right.
Yeah, which is
really,
cool. Yeah, that's something I do like about your characters. They're not just one-dimensional, you know?
Well, the artists I worked with for Dragon Ball Infinity, they told me that their favorite thing about my characters, and I hadn't even really considered this as one of my strengths, but they told me that my favorite character, that their favorite thing about my characters is that it feels like they have a history. It feels like they had a life prior to the story.
Yeah.
So it feels like they actually are characters. It feels like they actually are characters that logically can exist. And, you know, I think that's a huge part of their appeal.
Yeah. It does seem like that. Even when you start learning about Noob, and what was the other guy's name when he first gets to the water? And he was
Mirai,
explaining it. Yeah. It like those two, yeah.
I had one question. So I think I've asked you this before, privately. I'm gonna ask it again here. So speak in terms of like references. One of the biggest, ones obviously is, Taima's mysterious transformation. It's not Super Saiyan. It goes through the same principles of like what Super Saiyan is, but it's obviously very different. In the version of it, like where we see, it has like, alternate, like where it's just like in the animated version, there's no colors that really, depict that. And so some people think, okay, it's false Super Saiyan. But that's not really what it is. There's definitely things that are similar to it, because if he was actually Super Saiyan, it would contradict the original story, which is what you told me about. So what is this form that Taima has gotten, and what exactly is he able to do? What is the multipliers or whatever?
Well, essentially the idea is that Taima, it's sort of like false Super Saiyan, but it's more so that he does not have, despite the fact that he has a pure heart, and despite the fact that he was put in a situation to experience the trigger to become a Super Saiyan, he doesn't have the power to do it. He doesn't have the S cells to do it. If you ask Toriyama,
that's why he got flicked back so easily. He doesn't have the
S cells to do it. But essentially, I don't look at it as false Super Saiyan. You can look at it that way. I have called it false Super Saiyan before.
Yeah.
But I've talked about this a lot, but essentially the idea is, and this is something a lot of people don't catch on to when it comes to Saiyan characters, when their heart starts beating, they either transform or they evolve. They get stronger as they fight. Okay, so there's two outcomes. So the entire reason that Goku becomes a Super Saiyan is because that huge emotional shock that he experiences causes him to nearly like almost have a heart attack, which causes him to have this huge boost in power. So it's essentially the same concept, except in Taima's case, he is completely enraged due to the fact that he doesn't have Goku's nature, right? He doesn't have... He hasn't learned the principles of martial arts to be able to control that effect on his personality.
Yeah.
So part of the reason that, and this is something I actually haven't told you, Heish, but part of the reason that I wanted Taima to have the gray looking shade of hair in that scene is because it matches Brood's skin color. And Brood prior to meeting Taima was a monster. Okay? He was a monster who would just wipe people out in the arena in a blind rage. Right? He would hone in on his ability to destroy things, and he would just destroy his opponents. Right? Yeah. So a lot of people don't catch on to this, but that is Brood's karma. Taima taking on that form is Taima becoming the same monster that Brood had become multiple times when he destroyed his opponents in the past, and Brood had to come face to face with the effect that he had on his student. And that's essentially what the form represents, is that it represents Brood's effect on Taima coming full circle, and him having to face the very beast that he was in the past through his student. So that's sort of the idea.
And it's just I suppose that makes a lot of sense in hindsight, understanding it now, like after reading the story, because there was multiple times and multiple instances where time is like, listen, we don't need to fight. We have another option. We have a choice instead of like going through this, going with what, with what Noob wants. We can fight together and at the very least try to stop it. Granted, seeing as how powerful Noob actually is, if there probably would not have been much to be done. However, I suppose if it was in a sense of like what would happen in the realm of Dragon Ball, the instances that could have taken place there could have been very much different. Like just by not by the simple fact like, okay, they would win, but the act but acting upon that choice could have actually yielded results differently in some way, shape, or form, because the story would have been would have fitted the narrative in that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so Brood turning down Taima every time he asks to work with him is essentially Brood being like, I'm just gonna. It's essentially embracing who he was before he met Taima and before he was influenced by Riki. Like that were his trials. Those were his, like he was put in a situation to where him changing and him becoming a better person was really being put to the test through his student, and he failed that test, and as a result he suffered for that. Like that's sort of the idea there. Like that's another thing that like I really try to be as accurate with the story as possible in terms of how Toriyama implements karma in Dragon Ball. I try to do the exact same thing in this story. I like to really, because it makes it seem like there's a god who's like turning the wheel, and like everything seems fated. Everything seems like fate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem it doesn't seem like random events. Everything seems like it's fate.
Yeah.
So that's the necessity. That sort of writing is a necessity in that sense. If you want it to feel authentic and feel like Dragon Ball.
Yeah.
Yeah, like because karma's like a big factor in there, with Dragon Ball, and like so like it. And it's just like I love that is one thing that you really do carry over, because it definitely holds on to that feeling of Dragon Ball that we really I think that not a lot of people realize is such a huge factor, but it's even the thing that I feel in a lot of ways keeps Super being relevant, despite the fact that a lot of like media, as we talked about in the in the Eastern versus Western thing, Super still feels like it's taking from the roots of like what Dragon Ball was, which is why it doesn't suffer the same problems as like what a sequel would be to a show.
That's right. Yeah, well, Toriyama's older, he's experienced. Back whenever he was in the Dragon Ball Z era, he was taking from Western media much more. Now, I'm not saying he doesn't take from it at all in the modern time, because he still does, but he was taking from it much more because he wanted Dragon Ball Z to have a very authentic, unique feel. But in Dragon Ball Super's case, he he's definitely going back to the source. He's definitely like, instead of like trying to rely on like modern Western pop media to like to appeal to his audiences, he you can tell he is prioritizing implementing the source material like he did originally whenever he first started doing Dragon Ball. You can really see that in his modern storytelling style, and I think that a lot of that is just due to the fact that he is so old that when he started doing Dragon Ball Super, he fell back on what he used to do in the Dragon Ball era, and he's like, you know what, I'm going to take stuff from Journey to the West and I'm going to flip it around like I used to, and I'm going to have fun that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you can sort of just see that, and it makes a lot of sense, because not a lot of people know this, but right before Super came out, we all know about Dragon Ball Evolution and how it came out around that time, and but there was another movie that came out, right? And a lot of people don't know about this, but this is a Journey to the West movie that was influenced by Akira Toriyama. Okay, so the creator of Kung Fu Hustle, he worked with Toriyama to create Stephen Chow. He worked with Toriyama to create a Journey to the West film. So essentially, and Toriyama didn't touch the script or anything like that. He was just extremely influenced by Toriyama, and so he told Toriyama that he was going to use him as inspiration for the film, and he also hired Toriyama to draw the cover art for the film. So Toriyama drew a picture of Sun Wukong for the film. Toriyama watched the film in Japanese, and when he watched the film in Japanese, that's how he discovered Beerus's voice actor, because Beerus's voice actor played Sun Wukong in that film. So,
oh my gosh!
And if you read his review of the film, okay, he talks about it like it's the greatest movie he's ever seen in his life.
Yeah.
So that tells you that was a huge motivator for Toriyama to start implementing Journey to the West into the story more so again, because he was so heavily, he enjoyed seeing that movie so much, and he enjoyed seeing his effect on media, and he enjoyed seeing how he had influenced this film, and so you know, he took inspiration from that, and I think the fact
more
that
influence.
I think the fact that he hired the Monkey King's voice actor to play Beerus is, I think that really speaks to just how much of an impact that film had on his motivation going into the Dragon Ball Super era. You know?
Yeah,
definitely.
Another thing. Okay, we talked about this before the podcast. You said that there was a similar reference that you put in for Taima that has to do with, just like with Sun Wukong, falling down from heaven. But instead of it being from like Journey to the West, it's more so another thing that's leaning in towards referencing Eastern philosophy. Sorry, not Eastern. Egyptian
mythology. Yeah,
Egyptian mythology.
Essentially, the idea is that it's a lot like Greek mythology. The land of reeds is somewhere you can only reach via the trials that you face in the desert in life, but also via a boat in the afterlife. So the whole entire process of Taima traveling through the desert and then getting on that boat and then reaching the island of the gods is a reference to the process of life and death. It's a reference to the cycle of life and death within Egyptian mythology. That's what it is.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah,
that is really cool.
That's actually why all of these characters in the story, especially like Noob and Garura, and of course I like to play on Darwinistic concepts of survival of the fittest. So like you'll notice that like Mirai is a victim to Genzai a lot because he's a bird, and it's a cat and a bird, so it's like that. And then there's like the dog character who dominates the cat character, and you know what I mean? It's like the hierarchy of survival of the fittest. I do like to play on that in this story, but also Appo, Garura, and Noob, who are a jackal, a hawk, eagle, whatever you want to consider him, and a serpent. Those three animals also represent the karmic wheel of life in Eastern philosophy, and also in Egyptian mythology. Those three animals, I can actually pull up an image of the Chinese wheel of life, and you will see that it is a bird, a canine, and a
Crane?
and a serpent.
Oh,
So
serpent,
like,
yeah.
you know, so the whole entire story is referencing the cycle of life and death. It's very, very similar to Journey to the West in that way. Journey to the West also references the cycle of life and death, but it does it through the lens of Chinese mythology, whereas my story does it through the lens of Egyptian mythology. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I like that you used a lot of Egyptian mythology in it. I'm a big fan of Moon Knight, and that's heavily influenced with Egyptian mythology.
Yeah.
So with you adding that, there's stuff like I understood and knew already, because I learned some stuff from Moon Knight, but I really... yeah, same here. But I really love how you made that such a big part of this story, which it does make sense because Beerus's race is kind of like Anubis, looks kind of like how Beerus does, right? Yeah.
In Egyptian mythology, there was a race of people known as the Bastet, and they were essentially cat people.
Yeah.
So the idea was that they were cursed to be hungry forever.
That's why they're super skinny.
So Beerus he's a huge play on a lot of this cat mythology within Egyptian mythology, because as you'll see, Beerus and Champa are constantly hungry. Like they have to eat all the time. So like also there is a saying amongst the Bastet that if you leave your tribe, like if you're a member of the Bastet tribe, and you leave the tribe, you leave like where you're coming from, like the village and stuff, you doom the entire village, and that is a curse that Anubis put on this race of people. So, you know, I really wanted to play on that with Beerus's character, like all of the cat mythology within Egyptian mythology. I really wanted Bastet's also a god in Egyptian mythology. It's a female cat god. But there's also a race of people in Egyptian mythology who are all cat people. So, like, I really wanted to play on that.
People like seeing about other, like, races in Dragon Ball. Like, people like Frieza's race, too, but we don't know much about it. But you touching up on Beerus's was such a cool idea and to think of, to make a big part of your story. So yeah, that
right. Well, I just figured, you know, I wanted to go so far back in time. That I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to have that whole like warrior-esque theme.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of like Beerus's civilization is very similar to the Saiyans in a lot of aspects.
Yep.
And due to that, you know, it's just it works. It makes it still feel like Dragon Ball.
Yeah. I did get that Saiyan vibe off them too. Yeah, so you got that in there. Yeah.
Which, I mean, it makes sense because like Beerus, a lot of the aspects of his character that are defining of his character are just more extreme versions of Vegeta's personality traits.
Yeah, that is true.
So in that sense, there is there is a connection between Beerus's antics and Vegeta's and Saiyans and Beerus and like the Saiyans used to conquer planets and sell them, destroy planets and sell them, and Beerus, he just destroys planets. He doesn't have to sell them.
Yeah, pretty much same thing.
You know, he runs. So there is some similarities there to play on too.
Yeah.
But yeah, once you start catching on to, and I think that's another thing that I wanted to prioritize in terms of making the story enjoyable, is the references to Dragon Ball Super itself.
Oh yeah, yep.
You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of stuff in the story that you can you can look at it and you can be like, oh, and then you can like it. If you read Dragon Ball Infinity and then you read Dragon Ball Super, it feels like it could take place.
Yeah, it does.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't fit. It doesn't feel like it's like just some story that somebody made up because they're a fan of Dragon Ball. It feels like something
It's
that
part
could
of the
actually
story,
take
yeah.
place. And that's what I wanted to accomplish in that sense.
Yeah, you did, definitely. And
Like, the moment, if they ever do anything surrounding, Beerus's parents or something like that, like, I'm just going to be like, damn, the way you did it was better. Probably will. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows if they ever do anything
a lot
like
of
that.
people But a lot of people are really interested in Beerus and Champa's past as well. I was reading through some of the comments. They're like, man, I would love to see more about them.
Yeah, part of the reason I was so confident to delve into Beerus and Champa's past is because, personally, I don't think Toriyama will ever do it.
Yeah, he
Because
probably
it's
won't.
not-
I don't think
it's-
he would.
Because it's not appealing in terms of the overall continuing narrative of Dragon Ball.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
It is compelling in the sense that we want to know,
Yep.
but it's not compelling in the sense of, is that really a good direction to go with,
Yeah.
expanding the lore, like, as we move into the future?
That would...
You know what I mean? I don't think they see... Yeah, I don't think they can... It's just like, how much... Like, we would love... I'm sure every fan would love to have a backstory about Frieza as well.
Oh, yeah,
and his
yeah.
species and his planet. You know what I mean? Yet... we don't get that. We never get that.
We never
And
will.
that's
The only
because
way,
it's not
this
really
is how I see Toriyama going about it.
Yeah.
The only way that he would actually expand on a character's backstory is if there's another character he decides to make related to that character, triggering different, things from a previous story. Just like kind of like how,
Like Broly.
well, not even just necessarily. Well, yeah,
Broly's a good example.
Well, yeah, Broly is an example. Yeah, we got more of the history of Planet Vegeta and such, through Toriyama's stuff. Even though it was kind of already, a lot of it was already like done in, and talks about it was just an adaptation of Minus combined with some other, different things, set up in there. But yeah, it did give us a little bit more of the history, why were the Scouters made? Why? Where were the Scouters even introduced? Because I mean, a lot of people before then had the theory that the Scouters were made by the Tuffles. I believe in Japanese they're called the Sufurians, and and so because that was really only because of the fact that during the flashback that we saw, or in the anime in Z of the Saiyans taking over them, they were wearing the Scouters. So we thought that was just simply stolen technology, but it's not. They had scopes before then.
Yeah.
They had a whole thing, about it like that. And then Toriyama changes up the question even more, making it to where Vegeta is now all of a sudden Vegeta the Fourth. However that works.
Right. Well, those are the Saiyans, though. You know what I mean? I don't It's kind of a given that he's going to expand on the backstory of the Saiyans, to be honest with you. In comparison to the other races and the other characters and stuff like that, it's kind of a given.
Yeah.
When they expanded so much on Granola's past and the Ceruleans, that was actually kind of mind-blowing to me. Because, we did do that with the Namekians on Namek, that is true.
Yeah.
But, the way, that storytelling style, and that arc specifically was very different. Because it introduced a character and then immediately went into the history of that character.
Yeah.
They immediately went into everything that happened in that character's past. Whereas that's normally not how it goes. Normally it takes some time. I mean, Piccolo...
Yeah.
We didn't find out he was a Namekian until Dragon Ball Z. We didn't find out Goku was a Saiyan until Dragon Ball Z. So it's that was sort of jarring to me. Now, I don't think it's necessarily out of character for Toriyama to do it at all, but in terms of the overall narrative aspects of Dragon Ball, it just seems like the way, the direction that Toriyama's heading in, he's more so concerned with just moving forward rather than backwards.
Yeah.
And that's something I wanted to take advantage of, because if I'm moving backwards, I don't have to worry about him moving backwards because he's trying to move forward.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah, but then it's just, and then I think the only reason why he did that, because it was just because of the fact that it was at a point where what Saiyan Pride was necessary in order for the characters to move forward. That was like the whole big thing why Bardock, like them learning that through Bardock. If Bardock was not like involved in there, then Vegeta could not have and Goku could not have moved forward with the proper understanding of Saiyan Pride. There would be no other character at that point who can really teach them that.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was multiple reasons why they needed to expand on Granola as a character. Honestly, there was multiple reasons. It wouldn't have worked if you didn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they had to.
But yeah, so like, normally what Toriyama does is he just introduces a character. Yeah. So like Taima, I just introduced that character. I didn't like go and I didn't like explain immediately his backstory or anything like that.
Yeah.
I just brought you into his world with no context. Right? You didn't have context.
Yeah.
Because one issue that a lot of writers have, now there is situations where that context is necessary, like Granola, and like Taima a few chapters later, whenever you find out where he came from.
Yep.
That context is necessary to a degree, but if you give too much context, people lose interest.
Yeah.
Because that sense of wonder is gone. That sense of like, oh, well, where did this character come from? What's he been through? What kind of part? You know what I mean? Like
mystery is more intriguing.
Kind of wonder about these things.
And just to clarify for some of you guys, listening into this, like, if you're only coming into this and you've only seen the recent remastered version of Dragon Ball Infinity on Rising Fist channel, that part where you see Taima's backstory right away was actually just like a bonus thing that comes in that was expanded on in the chapter that actually comes in after the fight that Taima had with Brood, and that it was a creative decision on Rising Fist, and in order to have that in at the very beginning. In the original manga, this was
when he was a baby.
This was not like that. Yeah, when he was a baby, and like he came down through the time.
Yeah, Paul thought that telling the story more linearly would be more appealing in terms of the animated version of the event.
Yeah.
Personally, that's not how I tell stories, but I understand why he chose to do it because, like, Taima had already become popular on his channel anyway.
Yeah.
So, like, I understood the logic behind it. It was just like, well, we're trying to expand on a character that we've shown multiple times on the channel before.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's just go ahead and throw his backstory in.
Yeah, it wasn't a bad idea. I think either way would have worked good, but yeah, throwing it on there, you learn it right away, then jump right into his story. But yeah, I think either way, would have been good.
Right, especially since it followed two previous animated episodes that were being repeated in that video.
Yep.
Like, I can sort of see why he felt that was necessary.
Yeah, and I honestly, I did like that touch, kind of going into it as well, just like having seen, going into there with like the music and the Broly movie and such too, like there was, like, even though like this was something that's touched on, like, like later, if you're reading the story in chronological order, I think that having that sense of backstory in a way brings in another sense of appeal that I did really enjoy from that. So I think there's benefits in both ways of telling the story.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah,
but yeah, I loved. I no, just like.
Do you guys have any more questions or?
I'm just really enjoying it so far. I'm still like we were saying, I'm about halfway through it, but I'm digging it.
I just want to pick your brain. I want to know what you guys are interested to know.
Honestly, I was asking you questions throughout it. Yeah, you go, Starblast. I'll give you a question after.
Actually, no, hold on. I feel like you've been waiting a while to actually ask questions, so please go ahead. Go right
well,
out.
Like what I was saying, I was asking him throughout it, but you didn't complete the story yet, right? You're still in the process of completing it, and
yeah.
And what's out right now is it's pretty much the first arc to Taima's story.
Yeah. So chapter 10 is what I intend to be the wrap up of this arc.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll work out that way because when you're doing the art, when I write the script,
yep,
I don't know how much art is going to come out of that script. I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's really hard for me to gauge, how many chapters it's going to be. But the intention is for the next chapter to be the final chapter of this arc. So everything is out. in terms of the first arc, except for this final episode. And I am trying to get it done, but it's difficult because I'm working with 2 other artists who have issues of their own.
Yeah.
You know, and we're trying. You know, I want it to come out really good. Like I'm almost being too picky about how it comes out. If I'm being real. So.
But you want to make sure it turns out good.
I'm trying to work it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want the ending to really. I want it to really hit because like. The whole entire story, the whole entire first arc is building up to. I already knew where this was going, and this is like one of the most important parts of the story to me.
Yeah.
So I want it to, I want it to really hit home. But yeah, everything
I'm
that's
sure
out
you'll
right
do
now
it.
on Webtoons is, everything that's out right now up to on Webtoons is up to chapter 9.
Yeah.
So if you've never read DBI and you want to read it, it's on Webtoons. You can read all the way up to chapter 9. You can also go to the Tao of Dragon Ball website. I've been working with Derek Padula.
Yep.
He's a very, very successful writer.
I know who he is.
Has published works about Dragon Ball. You can go to his website, and on his website, I'm actually doing bonus pages for him that aren't on Webtoons. So there is some bonus pages you can see if you go to the Tao of Dragon Ball website if you're curious about that too.
Yeah.
But on the Tao of Dragon Ball website, we are only up to chapter 4 right now, but there is some bonus pages. So, if you read it through on Webtoons and you're curious to see if you missed anything, you can go to the Tao of Dragon Ball website and there is some bonus pages there.
Nice.
So like for example, in the chapter where Brood is training Taima, there's some extra fights in the arena prior to him fighting Brood on the Tao of Dragon Ball website. He actually fights a couple of extra
That I have
characters
to see.
prior to Brood. So yeah, you can go check that out if you're interested in that.
Yeah. And say like it keeps like it looks like people really like it. So say it keeps doing good. Would you ever, I don't know if you did this already, but have you made actual like copies of the manga, or is that something you plan to do?
So my goal is once we get to chapter 10, once we have the first arc done, I want to make physical copies. But I want to do that after the first arc is done.
Yeah.
Because I want to make, and this is just for me, like I might gift some copies to people or something like that. But I want to create a leather-bound book.
Okay.
That has the DBI logo on it in gold. Which will make it look sort of like the Book of the Dead from Egyptian mythology.
Oh my
because the Book of the Dead has the
That's cool.
It has the Ouroboros on the front of it.
Yeah.
So I want to create like this leather-bound book that has DBI the first arc in it with the insignia on it, and that's sort of my goal. That's what I want.
Yeah,
to do.
that would
I want
be
to take all
awesome
of the
to
first
get.
arc and put it into one leather-bound.
Yeah, and you're not just making it a basic cover. You're adding some really dope shit to it. So go ahead, Starblast.
Yeah.
Here, I thought it was gonna be like a like you were gonna make it like the Book of
paperback.
Thoth, but like or like something like that. Like how, well, no, like as like with the volume, like no, you're going like super fancy with it too, though. Like that's just awesome. I like that.
Yeah. But as like a collector, you really like stuff like that. It sticks out more compared to a regular manga that's just a regular paperback, even just a hardcover one.
Yeah, I probably will make individual chapter copies as well.
Yeah.
And I probably will end up taking some of those with me to comic conventions.
Yeah, you gotta.
And like having raffles. Like one thing I really want to do is I want to take some copies with me to a con, and I want to get a booth.
Yep.
And I want to have a raffle where people can win free copies.
That's a good idea.
So I will eventually do stuff like that as well, but I can't do that until I have chapter 10 done comfortably for me. Like that's just something I like. I could have already made physical copies if I wanted to. But
yeah, you want to wait till you have the first arc complete and you could read the first part of the story. I understand what you're trying to do. Yeah.
Okay. Honestly, like when it comes to time, it's just like I really do feel like a sense of closeness with the character. Like the more that I understand him, it's like just from voicing his character alone and like going through like the journey throughout the story, it gives me like an experience with the character that I feel like is really unique and personal to me. That I don't think that because there's lots of other aspects that I really try to really to like reflect in the means of like which he's voiced, like talking about it as well, like just because it's fun. One of the things that I thought you mentioned was funny is that you started off the story at the point where Taima was 12 13, right before like the
12.
Oh yeah, it was 12. Okay, right before like he goes through like the Saiyan growth spurt, and I think that's just like I think that adds a lot to what I was really trying to do throughout with the voice acting, is that he starts off all innocent at the very beginning, like talking like that with the lighthearted voice, and then later as he gets older, I try kind of making him deeper. The more that he kind of goes through stuff, the more that you see him physically age, and even get that little bit of like hair
little chin hair.
well. The chin hair, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you did transition it good though.
Yeah, and you did a great job, Heesh. I gotta give you props. You did a great job on the voice acting.
Yeah,
I'm very proud of how that whole thing came out.
He has a great main character voice. He really does.
Yeah. No, but I appreciate it. It's just like I love Taima. I like the story that you're going, and I'm losing sleep at night waiting for you to bring out that next chapter. I really want to see where this story ends up going in the future. So, guys, if there is a possibility that Jordan will finish this story, then go down and give him like $2 a month on his Patreon or something. Help the guy out to keep it funding so that the arc can be finished, and then later down the line, hopefully the future chapters will be animated, which will be a very fun thing to do. Anyways, any final thoughts?
Seen it. Yeah, if you never read it or seen it, I definitely recommend it. I'm not even halfway through it yet, and I'm really enjoying the story so far. So I definitely recommend checking it out if you're a fan of Dragon Ball and just love that type of stuff. Plus, you have Jordan's unique mind writing it as well.
Right.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any final?
I really appreciate you guys having me on. That's my final thoughts. I really appreciate it.
No
Anytime
problem.
you guys want me to come on here and talk about my story, I'll talk about it for hours.
Nah, thank.
Yeah, we like having you on. You have the most guest appearances as of now.
As of now. And most likely later in the future, we'll bring you on for it again. But yeah, of course, Jordan, as usual, thank you so much for hopping on. Thank you so much for telling us about the story. And if you guys do want to listen to other podcasts and other episodes that Jordan has been in, check out the other episodes where we talked about the differences between Eastern and Western philosophy, and then the video on Gohan. Yeah. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching.
Yeah. Also, check out my YouTube.
Yes.
Channel.
Jordan the Dragonlee.
I break down all of this kind of stuff that inspires me from Dragon Ball. I point out all the references of Journey to the West and stuff like that in Dragon Ball. So go check that out too. I'd really appreciate it. I work really hard on my content on that channel.
You do.
Yeah, it does. The link will
do.
pop up at the end of the video. A card might pop up as well, and the link will be in the description also. So be sure to check out his channel. Very informative Dragon Ball information on his channel. I watched plenty of his videos, so check it out.
Check it out. All right, guys, without any further ado, we will see you guys in the comment section. Until then.
Thanks for listening to our episode. If you're on YouTube and watch the video, then thank you for watching as well. We are your hosts, Starblast Studios, and me, Daredevil 19. And if you enjoyed our episode on Spotify, be sure to give us a follow and a rating. And we do thank you. And if you did watch this on YouTube, be sure to give a like if you liked it, and a subscribe if you enjoyed it. And we will catch you on the next episode of the Plastic Power Podcast.